That's great. Okay, now we'll be able to take questions once the other speakers join us. Please join us up the front.
Isn't there questions that they ask and you don't answer them? You don't have to. Yeah. If they don't ask any questions,
Yeah. Because we're recording this session, we're going to ask you, if you have a question or a comment, to move to the standing mic that you can see there with the little spotlight on it, not to be intimidating at all, but I wonder first if there are any burning questions or comments from people in the audience here to any of the presenters. No? Oh, good, thank you.
This is for anyone who wants to answer it. I come from predominantly a history working with people who identify as having disabilities and also early childhood. And I'm just wondering about process of receiving and documenting those people's feedback and responses to artworks that may not be cognitive and verbal. They may be physical, or they may be, I know my son's 4 and he sees a piece of artwork and he may go, it's incredible, or he may go, oh, I've got to jiggle my body around or whatever. And I'm just hearing how we document, record and value those other languages that people use that aren't necessarily cognitive and verbal and aren't necessarily based on academic history, I suppose. Yeah. So I'll throw that over to anyone who's got a burning response.
Certainly in our experience, the video footage is definitely something that stands out in terms of, and enables people to get the idea of how children engage with art. And they're more likely to view the video than actually read a really lengthy research report. So in other ways, PowerPoint slideshows of images, photographs, and we do a program at the gallery called Toddler Tuesday where kids as young as 18 months actually engage with works of art and they use their body. It's through dance and play and movement that they actually express their interest and newfound knowledge about the works that they're engaging with.
Can I make just a little comment? And that is that I think one of the things, like documenting through video, etc., one of the things might be that, if I have disability and my response, physical response to an object or a piece of work might be pretty full on, but we have to be careful about how we interpret that response. And so the person who knows that child or young person needs to be involved in that interpretation because they know that individual. So I think that that's really important because I sometimes think that we get it wrong, that there could be a physical response and we can read that as positive or negative or energetic or whatever, and it might be that actually you've got an itch, So we have to engage with the people that know those individuals if we're trying to understand it, I think.
I guess I'd say too that just generally across the board, without having disabilities, responses to art may be emotional, cerebral, intellectual, it's a whole range. So we're not just people with disabilities that we should be thinking about those issues in regard to.
And we all have to say that children research into the serious business of children in the arts is the least researched. It's not very well researched, it's not very well documented, and I think that that's because of the status of where the work is being held. So I think it's really important for us as workers to, these sort of forums, and well done on your leadership, is about building the case for the serious business of children and the arts, and actually starting to think and build some discourse so that we can actually learn in a longer way about the impact of our work. Because I know you guys, like me, we want them to have a lifelong connection to our institutions. So I think, for me, I would say that we are research and evaluation poor across the board. And I'm very privileged now that we're at least starting some research, but I think it's something we can all do better.
And research doesn't have to be an in-depth study, it can be just general observation that you might, and weekly meetings with other staff in your section to talk about any interesting insights or observations you've picked up, and then regularly taking on board that feedback and making some changes
Thank you very much. I think there may be someone who's making their way down for another question or comment.
I'm just wanting to ask, as a mother, I work for Arts Queensland, but this is a mummy thing, because some of your stories really resonated. We went again and again and again to the Children's Art Museum for Andy Warhol, because my little 3-year-old and his crew loved it. And we had varying experiences, that sort of notion of welcoming space, and the staff inductions, and how the values and the philosophy, how that goes down to that first interface, because the first experience was so charged and so fantastic, and we had such a welcoming, gorgeous young man who I want to kiss next time I see him, because he literally, for people like, well, I take my child all the time, but I was bringing new mothers from playgroup, and they were first experiences, so it was really welcoming and a really grounding experience. They'll come back. But the second time I tried to do the same experiment with a different crew and a different playgroup, we got the rule-bound stuff, and it was kind of a really intense experience. So I guess the question I'm sort of asking is, you've got the issues of staffing, but then also how you're inducting and keeping on informing the valuing of children placed centrally. So I just thought that would be an interesting place to talk.
I'm happy to pick that one up. Certainly, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think one of the big challenges we have, those front of house staff are traditionally the lowest paid people in many instances in the organisation, and yet they are our public face. And the challenge, I think, with many front of house staff, they come in Monday to Friday, or any day over the spread of 7 days generally, keeping their energy, keeping their enthusiasm, recognising that they have peaks and troughs in their ability to deal with people. We're not very good at that. We employ you to work 5 days a week, and I want you to be as great on Monday morning when you come in as you are on Friday afternoon. It doesn't work like that. And I think the challenge, I think, in reflecting on this workshop and other things, it's about how we, I guess, ensure that people are energised and enthused, and I don't have an answer for that at the moment. It's something we'll mull over. But yeah, I agree with you totally. It is about that energy and enthusiasm that the staff have for engagement, for some of the hands-on activity you're talking about, as well as the rule-bound versus real friendly approach. And
Having said the rule-bound, the rules were given by the first instance, but they were given in
such a way, yeah.
Such a way that the kids actually enjoy. So what do you mean? I want to go home and bash this. Okay. And enjoyed it within the rules. So yeah, it's not. I'm not sort of advocating no rules. I'm just advocating
the delivery. And I don't. I mean, I get. I heartily agree. Our institution is not perfect, and a long way from it in some respects. But it's a lot about that training and the culture. And the environment that those staff feel that is valued by the organisation to spend the time engaging in that and delivering well. And part of it is about rewarding that when it's observed, when it happens. One of the things we do at workshops is offer visitors the opportunity to nominate a staff member who they feel has given exceptional experience or whatever today, and I take the time to actually see those and then give that feedback to staff as well, and acknowledge that is a valued part of the experience. And I'd like to think that encourages staff to continue to go out there and do that, because it is recognised and valued from the top of the organisation.
But by the same token, don't you think that if they don't exemplify child-centred practice and one gives them training and support, my bottom line is you don't fit, it's time to go. Because I think that it's absolutely vital that all of my staff and arts workers exemplify the philosophy and values that we're trying to live every day. We don't expect them to be perfect, but we do expect ourselves to be articulate about our process and what we're trying to achieve. I absolutely value them and think they have the skills, but if they don't deliver, I think that we have to get rid of them. And the other problem is, to be kind, because it was all so nicey before. I mean, some of the realities of HR are that there are people who are not a cultural fit. I think the other significant factor is that people are not getting trained, and the worst context for us is that you will only know how they're going to go by chucking them on the floor. And for us, when they're highly interactive experiences with children and babies, that's very difficult. But they're some of the realities we're working in. So I think it's being present and knowing and being clear. And actually, when you see the poor behaviour, I think it's actually calling it. Setting in, I have my staff, my project coordinators have to role model, they have to provide the leadership, we will reprimand, I think I take it really seriously because at the end of the day, that 2-year-old can actually be scarred. And I think that's, well, like you're saying though, and they're often the small, least resourced, blah, 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 staff members, but they're the most vital.
I think with coming back to the question about the rules, if the rules are made clear from the start, I think that's fine. It's just with people keep coming back to and saying, oh, sorry, don't bash the pillow. Oh, sorry, you're actually not allowed to take photographs. It's just, and I've just remembered they're illegal, my photographs, so sorry about that.
That's all right. I'm thinking of relaxing it. It's just getting way too stressful. But it is, it doesn't, we all hate it. If we had started off this seminar telling you everything you couldn't do,
Absolutely.
it would be repulsive. Why would we? I think it actually shows, but you were so not centred on the child that you even think you have the power to speak to another human being like that. I think it's just completely inappropriate for our organisations to enable that sort of behaviour to go on. Acknowledge that it may, but do a lot of strategies to get that stopped.
And just very, very quickly, and I know this isn't necessarily about children, but as they go through that kind of early adolescence thing, they're less likely to be there with their parents, and so their interaction often happens with the security people in the place. And young people, time and time again, talk about that as being a negative experience. So whilst when they're little tackles, they're there with parents and you can see that and you can advocate for them. If you're a young person that's 13, 14, 15, you're already kind of often getting in a bit of trouble. And so it's front of house staff and the security people in that space. It's really important to forget about that.
I think you're right too, because we had an instance of that, and it's giving that feedback immediately, and we have security people who are never put on again. And it's, anyway.
Can we just have an indication how many people might be edging to say something? Because I don't want to... So there's a couple of people. There's one already standing.
This is a slightly different tact. I come from a shopping centre background, and what we've started to realise is that people are having a lot more meaningful experiences other than just food and byproduct in our asset. I suppose the questions I had were, we're starting to put some things into place that realise the importance of kids and their parents' education while in the shopping centre. Things like planning ways, when you get a little kiddie cruise, you do a little map to play with so the kids can see things out and learn as they go. And I suppose I'm just trying to ask the question, from a shopping centre point of view, do you think there's any relevance in having the integration of arts and culture into that experience as well? Is it there already, you think, or is it lacking, or what things could be better?
Great question.
What do you think about mind?
I think there's some of the reality that for a lot of people, like the people in the room here, you're converts, you're going to be in museums and galleries, and there's a lot of people that probably, and them and their children are not going to put their foot, no matter what you do, inside a gallery or a museum, unless the child or young person is going to their school group. So taking it out to them, particularly in the suburbs, I think, what shopping centre do you work in?
West End.
Oh, really? I think you can do one thing.
We have a lot of spaces that are created for children and parents, like parents' rooms, parents' car parks, all those things that we have. But I don't think we really realise the importance of and the relevance of the educational factor. Because it's just about shopping, and it doesn't matter what you're doing inside the place, just go to shop and leave. I think people spend up to 2 hours in these places. And it's important to actually value that experience that time. And you talked about it before. It's an hour-long trip just to get somewhere sometimes, including the logistics of getting the kids ready. When they get there, what's the experience like? It's a very similar thing.
I think the conversation with Arts Queensland would be a really good way to go. We're exchanging numbers.
I wonder whether Hannah and Rhea would like to comment on that. Would you like there to be art in the shopping centre?
That would be interesting, I suppose. Something to look at if your feet are all tired, walking around shopping.
I think it would be pretty good.
But we're a bit unconvinced, maybe. See how it goes. Would you do workshoppy things? What would you do?
We have, I know sometimes at hardware stores they have a little workshop kind of thing, when parents go and buy timber and the kids.
Do you think that's good?
I think that is really good because the children learn something and the parents don't have them sort of hanging off them. Say, can we go and get an ice cream, that kind of thing.
And I'm sure the organisation makes money out of it, so it's probably sorted out consumption at some point. So, okay, we're positive about that.
All right, and we've got another question or comment.
I wanted to ask what the panel thought about having children and young people on as voting members on the acquisitions committee of these organisations.
I think that's fantastic. So that means in organisations, do you want, and please help, but there's sort of programming people and then there's people who look after the collection.
I can give you an example on as you know, with our organisation we have a grants programme, and so we have 6 adults and 6 children sit on that panel and spend $100,000+, and they look at what programmes are coming in and they have a very, very good conversation about spending the money. I think it'd be very interesting to have them in terms of buying work for Queensland Art Gallery.
There's a question down the front about where you're from.
Oh, I work with the City of Melbourne.
Thank you.
At the most exciting children's space called Art Play.
So what do you think about that?
Well, we're looking at a strategy to spend money, aren't we?
Yeah. I think it's good to have children sort of interacting with that kind of thinking about what they need to buy with the money, but also it's sort of like some people, it's sort of sorry to find the right type of children, because some children might just go, we should spend it all on this, so it's also having it like, that it can't be all just like fancy, you need to have some real sort of...
You can't just have $100,000 in lollies.
No, and like, it's going to be stuff that you need.
And that's why they're on my programming software.
Andrew, did you want to comment on that at all from a museum point of view?
To have an acquisition committee with a budget that could purchase works of art or objects for the museum. I think it's a great idea. I'm not quite sure how we'd implement it, but I think it's a great idea.
Okay. There doesn't seem to be anyone else queuing, but I wondered whether there would be any body on the panel who would have a question or comment for one of the other panellists.
Mine's not a question but an observation. I thought it was really interesting for us sitting there while you all did your presentations, and there were some really strong themes that came out, you know, from the colour thing that you've done and that filming and then your experience as parents. Because we met last Friday and oh, how are we going to do this? So we already knew a lot of what their opinions were. So I don't know, what did you think?
It's like sort of it's kind of similar things to what we think, so it's sort of good that we're just not doing something that no one else would like.
Well, I think it's intriguing to hear what the State Library is doing, and also to hear about how the Queensland Art Gallery puts their programs together. And I think it is a very under-resourced area, children's art, and I'm aware from discussions with Barbara Piscatelli that there are not enough art books for children. I'm sure other resources are probably at that low level, and it's really in Australia it's time we step that right up. There's obviously a market and an audience, so I think it's really high.
I guess just reflecting on the conversation and the shopping centre comment, I think it's really interesting. I guess, are we preaching to a converted audience? I mean, I work in museums, so naturally I take my children there, and I suspect many of us in the room do that. How do we reach those people who are not consumers, I guess, if we want to use that term, of our product, being arts and culture? And the shopping centre is, I guess, the new meeting place, if you like, where people who potentially have never set foot in the art gallery, never set foot in the library, and never come into the city, are congregating, and I guess do they present opportunities for us to engage? And that saying goes, you know, if you get them while they're young, you convert them for life, sort of thing. But is that our opportunity as museums to, I guess, introduce the concept and then encourage people to come and actually into our buildings, into our spaces, into our programs?
It's an interesting thing because I did some work for Arts Queensland a few months ago, some consultation around the state about informing the children and children's courses. And we did some workshops with 4-year-olds at Bribie Island, which it was I've never ever done a workshop with 4-year-olds, but anyway, it was great. And that was very interesting because we were asking the children and their parents about their experience of the cultural authorities here. And basically, they didn't have any experience.
Yeah, they didn't have an experience. Exactly.
Their experience mostly was about the museum, because they'd come once a year on an excursion with the little kindy, and some of the book stuff that on storytelling that the library does. But their suggestion was that the shopping centre, that it needed to happen in the shopping centre. And so, you know, your idea is like parents are saying that to us because they're not going to be that often, not all, you know, bringing their kids down here. So I think it's a huge...
I just want to make a quick comment. I worked at the Asian Civilization Museum where it's very hard to get people to the museums there. And it's very easy to find them in the shops to go English. And they did do programs in the huge shopping centres that they had there, and they were phenomenally successful. The only problem was that sometimes they were treated like a leaving centre, where you can leave your children to go to shop. But if you actually educate the parents, they are a phenomenal opportunity. So I definitely support that.
Thank you very much. Well, I'd like you to join with me in thanking all of the presenters. Kerry's going to just come around and give everybody a little thank you gift. But please join with me in thanking everybody. And most importantly, if you're sitting there still digesting a thought, or you've got an aha moment that you really wish you'd had time to share, we have a blog that's gone live. We'd love you to go in and use it. We've taken your email addresses and we'll be emailing you, asking for your feedback on this session and also inviting you to contribute to the blog. So you don't have to write down the address now if you don't have time. We'll email you and invite you to do so. So thank you all for coming.